All right. Hey there, folks. Since book tour and conventions are still on hold for a bit, I figured I'd bring book tour to you. So welcome to Russ's Rockin' Rollercoaster Season 5, intriguing interviews with creative minds. With us tonight is Linda D. Addison, an award-winning author of horror, science fiction, fantasy, and poetry, including her collection, How to Recognize a Demon Has Become Your Friend, Story of My Childhood. Just kidding. The author of more than 360 poems, stories, and articles, Linda is the recipient of the Horror Writers Association Lifetime Achievement Award, the HWA Mentor of the Year, and a Science Fiction and Fantasy Poetry Grand Master. Welcome, Linda.
Hello, Russ. Happy to be here.
All right. Right on. All right. Just a heads up to the folks at home. Feel free to send me notes or questions you have for me or Linda in the chat box during the show, and we'll get to a few at the end. All right, as we always do, we'll start at the beginning. Linda, where were you born? Where'd you grow up?
I was born in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I grew up there until 18. I went to college in Pittsburgh. I went to Carnegie Mellon.
Okay, hold on. Whoa, you're skipping ahead of your whole life. Hang on. Slow it. Let's go back a second. Let's take a deep breath for a second.
Okay.
We got a lot to cover. All right, so you grew up in Philly. So I have to ask, was Rocky required viewing?
It just happened that way. Just because we knew that there was background Philly in the situation.
So talk to me about, so for me, so I've grew up in the New York area my whole life. Philadelphia, and even now, has often felt to me a little bit like somewhat of a forgotten city, even though it's right smack in the middle between New York and the Baltimore, DC area. Did you ever feel that way, or was that just sort of from an outsider's point of view?
No, I felt like that inside too, man. I mean, it's like people would be like, oh, that's so cool because it's near New York. I'm like, yeah. Like Philly wasn't its own thing. I mean, it had the bell of independence, the independence bell, but people didn't really jazz on that too much. It's gotten a little cooler now. I mean, I've been back a few times. They got like clubs and stuff, and but people still don't appreciate Philly for Philly, man.
So talk to me about that. What was it? So you were in Philly for for the first part of your life. What was it? What was it like? I mean, we were just talking offline. You said you were the oldest of how many kids?
9.
9 kids, the oldest of 9. So what's the breakdown of boys and girls?
I was gonna say 7 boys, 2 girls. And I was second mama, because guess what? In order to have 9 kids, you got to be pregnant all the time, which was my mom's part-time, full-time job.
You had 7 little brothers. Oh, good Lord.
So it was like my job to keep track of them while she was pregnant, having babies and stuff. And it was a little bit like Lord of the Flies, because out of the 9, I was the shortest as they grew up. But guys grow really fast. So it always come down to one of them saying, I don't want to listen to you. And then, we'd have to fight it out. And then they always won at some point. I'd be like, tap out, you win. May God be with you. My mom would be like, where's so-and-so? And I'd be like, I don't know, Mom, I lost the fight. This over. I hope they're well.
Oh, holy moly.
I like to joke about that. It wasn't like that with all of them, but it really come down to them being bigger and stronger than me, and me having to just like surrender and be like,
what's the gap in ages?
Oh man, this is what happens when your mother's a Catholic. So I was the first, and then there was a year or two, and then it got down to like 10 to 14 months. I was like, oh, Mom.
So your youngest sibling is how much younger than you?
Ooh, I'm not 100% sure, but I'm gonna go with let's see, I'm 69. I think he's in his 40s. Got to be 20 years, I think, something like that.
So at a certain point, did it become more like, I'm not even really your sister, I'm more like your aunt type of thing?
There was a lot of that. Yep. And then I was very quiet as a child and out in the world. So I watched and listened a lot. And so I tried to be very sort of non-judgmental in the house, which was really how my mom was too. You know, she sort of had this attitude like, you do bad things, but you're not a bad person. And that was her approach. So I tried to be like that. So yeah, a lot of times I was the one that took them out of the house to the playground and to trips because my mom was always pregnant. So, and then when they grew up, it's the same thing. You know, I still, whether I like it or they like it, I'm still sometimes looked at as an elder voice. I'm not trying to be that way, but sometimes it just happens. As people who have been on panels with me in conventions know, I apologize. Sorry, not sorry.
Right. So let me ask, but that kind of a gap, so you're saying that you were sort of quiet. I mean, I must imagine that your house must have been very loud just by the sheer number of people who were in it. How do you get heard?
Well, that was a struggle, and it was like a comedy movie TV series. I mean, because if you can imagine, I mean, I can remember a couple times when my mom would be like, could all of you just not call my name for like 60 seconds? It could never happen. It wouldn't happen. It just.
And so what did your dad do?
He, that's a good question. When I was very little and it was just me and my brother, he was a truck driver. After that, it became very fluid. I'm not really sure. I mean, he kind of hustled and did stuff and like that.
I see. Okay. Wow. All right. So let me ask, so you're out in Philly, and I want to stick on Philly just for a little bit, because it's interesting to me. Pre-pandemic, I was actually in Philly on business. I work in the real estate market, and I toured the entire city, and I'd been there a couple of times before. And, you know, you've got beautiful university and college campuses and the hospital and the research centers, but a lot of areas that they need a reset, you know, with boarded up row houses and kind of a being left behind kind of environment. Was that like it for you? Like where did you kind of fit into that? What part of Philly was your experience?
Well, it was very, I want to say colorful. It's a nice way of saying it. We moved a lot in order to sometimes avoid confrontation with bill collectors. So anyway, so I mean, we lived in Germantown, North Philly, West Philly, a lot of moving. Yeah. So, but the thing is, like when we were in North Philly, we moved to North Philly at the time. This was in the 760s. We moved there because there were so many of us and we were able to get some sort of standardized housing.
Right.
So that we didn't all have to sleep in one bed, which was, you know, not easy. So, so we had this beautiful apartment, but it was in a really tough neighborhood. Right. So, you know, there was gangs and a whole lot of stuff around us, which actually I remember now, like just, I sat and just thought a lot about why people did things and so forth. It led me to a lot of social questions, but so we lived in some neighborhoods that were tough, some that weren't as tough, you know, a lot of that. And so now when I go back, yeah, I mean, I've seen where there are just swatches of boarded up houses, you know.
Yeah. So what did you, so you had this, let's call it a very colorful family situation, right? Lot of moving parts, both in that home and where your homes were. So, but you're a kid growing up and you do your best to be a kid. Like what, when you weren't essentially babysitting any number of your brothers and sisters, like what did you do for you? Like, what was your jam growing up?
There wasn't a lot of time for any of that, to be honest with you, but because I just remember like spending my time when I wasn't in school washing diapers and stuff like that. My biggest thing, the only thing that I really did was read. I would start with, like, let's say in science fiction, Asimov, and read all the way to Zelensky. I mean, I just read everything all the time, not just genre, anything I could get my hands on. You know, I was very curious about everything. So when I got in junior high school, I read a lot about psychology and sociology because I was trying to understand, like, why people do what they do and why does this country have a thing with people with brown skin? You know, that was just like,
right.
So I had a lot of questions, still got a lot of questions, but even though I still read a lot of stuff. So reading was really my thing. And I also started writing in junior high school is when I started making up my own stories, mostly because my mother was an incredible storyteller and she hadn't graduated high school at that time.
Wait, so tell me about that. So talk to me about your mom being a storyteller.
So we didn't have books in the house. We didn't have bookcases like you see behind me and that are all over my house here. We basically, because we moved all the time and money was tight, it was all about like food, not books. But my mother was amazing with children, had always been apparently, and would tell us stories that went on night to night. And she just naturally knew how to end a story like on a cliffhanger. And then we'd be like,
Really?
then what happened? She was like, I'll tell you tomorrow night. And
so hold on, but what kind of stories?
Fables, fantasies, like similar to like Alice in Wonderland kind of stuff, you know, with animals that talked and adventures and stuff like that. She would incorporate us in them.
So where did that, so let me ask you, if you know, where did that come from in your mom? Do you know?
I don't 100% know. I just know maybe that's some genetic imaginative thing that she passed on, not just to me. A lot of my brothers and sisters are very creative storytellers, painters, drawers. They haven't actually made careers out of them, but they certainly are just incredible. So for her, like, we didn't always have TV or radio. Sometimes electricity was not in the picture. There would be candles. And so entertain that many kids at night without all the obvious things that we're used to just throwing our kids and turning Netflix on. She would tell us stories.
Did you have, I mean, back then, did you have, you know, other friends who were kind of into what you were into, or was this kind of like, this was just a you thing?
It was mostly a me thing because I went to school and then I'd go to the library and I came home. There was no play dates with other people. There were no people coming over to my house with 9 kids. No, that wasn't happening. Not adding more bodies to the scenario. So it was a very, in that way, it's very insular. But for me, I always came home from the library with a pile of books. So my angels growing up, as far as I often say my safe place was the library.
Right. I want to go back for just a second. You know, you'd made a comment. You said, you know, you're looking at the world, you know, around you, and, you know, you come to I'm assuming a very obvious conclusion that broadly, you know, why do folks have issues with people with brown skin, dark skin? I remember as a kid, as a very little guy, when I was in first grade, I think. It was a weird situation where my school was such that the first grade and the second grade were actually in one physical room. There was basically just like a piece of tape down the middle. So there was like 60 kids in the room, and I was the other white kid. And at the time, I didn't really think a whole lot about it. You know, when you're 5 years old, you know, this is just what my life is. I don't know. I didn't think about it a whole lot. My 2 best friends were Black, and that's just how it was. And I didn't care. It meant nothing to me. And then we moved when I was about 7 to the suburbs. Everybody was white, everybody. And I remember for about 6 months thinking like, and I couldn't articulate it then, but I thought like, this is weird. I don't really get this at all. And I was actually oddly very uncomfortable being around all these white people. It was very strange. And then over time, you know, what happens is you kind of just get used to your environment, and then you stop thinking about it because it just didn't affect me in that way then. And I'm just wondering how, you know, I'm still baffled by the, you know, why there's so many issues between, I mean, why skin color should matter. I still haven't really figured that one out.
Well, I'll tell you, you know what, I've done so much reading and studying. It's historic, it's economic, it's the way this country decided to define slavery.
Yeah.
Not everybody on this planet who's used slavery as an option has defined it the way this country has. So that's a whole nother conversation. But for me, I can remember, and I've shared this memory before, being 3 or 4 at a playground, and I was the only one probably when my brother was like a baby, and then playing with this girl at this playground that I always played with. And I said something to her about, coming to my house to play because my parents at that time had a nice little place, an apartment that had a backyard. Whatever she said to me in response, my memory is she said she can't come to my house because I was dirty. I cannot tell you what the words were because I was 3 or 4. I
Right.
didn't understand, but I do know we were playing in dirt.
Right.
So I thought she meant my hands were dirty. And I was like, well, I always wash my hands, something like I wash my hands when
Right.
this is what my mom always made me do. And I walked away from that conversation and remember going home and asking my mom, like, I didn't understand it because I walked away feeling like I was less of a person. That's
Right.
the first time that I remembered that feeling.
That's a young age. I mean, that's a profound feeling because it stayed with you for your lifetime. It tapped into something fundamental.
It did.
Yeah,
It
that's
did.
unfortunate.
I mean, it took me some time to process through that over the years and to
Right.
get to the point where now I can walk into a room and I can feel energetically when someone has a reaction because of the mohawk, the tattoos, the color of
Right.
my skin. And my reaction now is, I hope you get reincarnated as human because I have nothing.
That is what a great. That's fun. You are right.
I'll
Yes.
seriously say that
No,
prayer. I'm like, may you be
what it
reincarnated as
is human.
fully
You're right.
evolved human.
That is brilliant.
And then I just energetically let them go.
I love it. I love it. I love it.
I'm
So
trying to get that though.
yeah, we were talking a little bit offline. So you were in Philly till you said you were about 18, and you went to New York. Tell me about New York.
Well, I actually went to college when I was 18. I
Oh,
was one of the first in my family to go to college, not the first, but one of them. Now I marvel and have talked with my brothers and sisters about how so many of our children have gone to college. But at that time, it was a big deal. So I went to Carnegie Mellon. I got into physics, then I changed to math, and I graduated with a BS in math.
wow.
That's when I went to New York. I had met my first husband, Ken Addison, and he was a musician, and he was like, I need to be in New York. And I always loved New York because,
What
you know,
kind, what kind of
because
musician?
Philly was near New York.
What kind of music? What kind of music?
I would call it jazz. He's
Okay.
written, I mean, he passed a couple of years ago, but he had written some original things that actually were a dance company in Pittsburgh before we came to New York in 1975. In 1975, before we came out, dance company did a whole, the top Black dance company in Pittsburgh did their whole season around
What was his instrumentation?
piano.
Piano. Okay. So that's
He was
interesting.
amazing.
So let me ask you something. That's interesting. So you grew up in Philly and kind of, let's say, but socially turbulent environment, and end up in New York in the 70s, and then the Bronx is burning. So that must have been sort of so what's this like, this sort of evolution that you made through that first part of your life?
It was all through the lens of what I still am, and that is just highly curious and watchful, even though I'm not shy anymore. I tell people I used to be shy, and they're like, get out of here. I'm like, no, really, I never talked. I would just watch everybody.
Right.
But I understand more about the social animal than I did when I was a teenager. So now when people behave in different ways. So when I moved to New York, we were actually in the Village, which was like amazing to live in the Village in the time.
Where specifically?
I was just gonna say right over the Village Gate, man. Right on Bleecker Street over the Village Gate. Our apartment was over the Village Gate.
Oh well, God, I spent many years in my 20s down in the Village. Oh yeah.
I still love it so much. I mean, actually, now that I think about when we first moved to New York, we were in Soho because we couldn't afford anything else. We didn't have jobs. Once we got jobs and got our act together, then we wanted to be in the Village. He wanted to be there because of music, and I just friggin' love the Village, and I still do. So
it's hard not to love.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So let me ask you. So you have really kind of made a literary career predominantly in horror. And this is what fascinates me. So I am not a horror guy at all. I do not read horror. I don't watch horror. I am a scaredy cat to like a ridiculous extent. I am not ashamed to admit it. But I'm fascinated by it. And more so, I'm fascinated about other people's fascination with horror. And I've had a few horror folks on the show before, and I've asked the question, and I'm trying to really extract as much as I can. So what is it about? So for right now, let's just focus on, as someone who consumes horror, someone who reads, watches it, as a reader, as a viewer, what's the attraction? What's the draw to horror as opposed to, let's say, dark fiction or thrillers? But I'm talking horror, and I know there's different kinds of horror. So just like, what is it for you?
For me, it's that jump. It's like making me jump in my skin. You know, when something happens that gives me a chill or makes me, react in some kind of way, that is why I go to horror. That's what I enjoy.
So it's more
and
like
feeling safe while doing it. Because you know what? I grew up in situations that would make me jump, but I didn't feel safe. So
right. It's sort of like the roller coaster thrill without actually being in danger.
Exactly. Like the roller coaster that feels like you're jumping out of a plane with a parachute, only you're not jumping out of a plane with a parachute.
Right. Are you more into like the horror of the boo things jump out at you? Are you more into like psychological horror, more or atmospheric horror? Like what's or all?
Yes.
Yes. Yes to all.
Only I would say there's parts of horror that I am not as attracted to as much. And I'll just do it in a movie kind of way. The Saw movies, that's like, the cabin in the woods thing kind of, like there's a slow build that I like. And there's a sort of, those have like a jump every time you turn a corner. And that's just not my jam. But I can understand and appreciate why it would be someone else's.
Okay. So you mentioned a little earlier that you started to write when you were, a teenager?
Yep. In high school, I remember writing my very first thing, my own self.
Now, what you wrote, was that poetry? Was it prose? Like what were you writing?
It was this little story I wrote on the back of, my dad at that time was doing this thing where he was working with, what's the name of people when you go to jail, but then you get time to get out of jail and they're bail bondsmen. He was a bail bondsman. And so he had these forms that he had to fill out. And if they made mistakes, it would pile up. That was my very own paper to write on, because up until then I didn't have anything. Right. Now I have piles and piles and piles of journals and pretty books, and people gift me with books. So I remember writing my first thing on the back of it with a pencil. And it was like a kind of weird takeoff of Alice in Wonderland, only with my own, my dog. With my own dog, you know what I'm saying? His name was Skippy. And I didn't have a dog at that time, but so right. That was the first thing. The first thing I ever had in print. You want to know what that is, Russ?
Yes.
It was in high school, and it was a poem, and it was in my Germantown high school newsletter.
Oh, right on.
Yeah.
Very exciting. So you've been at this for many moons. So
a long time.
So poetry is kind of your core mode of expression. I mean, I am, and I'll admit it, I'm an awful poet. I just am. And again, no shame. I don't just, as a writer, it just doesn't, I don't flow that way. But and although I do, when I read good poetry, I do love it and I appreciate it. I'm just not the guy to write it. So what is it about the form of poetry that appeals to you? Like what is it that works for you that, because it's, I'm always trying to figure it out, because it's like, I don't see it as a writer. I just don't see the pathway. I don't know how to do it.
Well, the thing is that I've thought about this a lot, because I've always felt that poetry was my first voice. I've had a lot of poetry in print, and this is how I've won awards and gotten recognition over the years. I think it began with fables and fairy tales when I was in elementary school, because again, in school, I was very quiet. In fact, my teachers would tell my mom I'd get higher grades if I just paid attention and stopped daydreaming. And you know what? everything I've done now is daydreaming. So it's too bad. I'm just saying.
That's
But
right.
at that time, it wasn't a plus.
Yeah, right.
So, but I loved fairy tales like Hans Christian Andersen and stuff like that because it had talking animals. It had all this stuff that that's the way my imagination was. The teacher would be talking about something and I'd be sitting there daydreaming about cats with wings. And
but the thing is, though, is that a lot of those stories, I don't, in my former life, I was going to be an English teacher. So I had to take part of my course load was children's literature. So I had to read all those classics, and you read them and they are fucking creepy and dark as hell.
Saying they've cleansed some of it now, and I don't appreciate the concept. But back in the day when I was watching them and when you were reading them, there was a lot of darkness there. So the whole point, again, I've since then read a lot about why, because every country and culture has its own set. And the whole point of these things in all of the cultures all over the world is to teach children where there's danger.
Right.
Danger, danger.
Right.
And how you're going to do that if you don't scare them. And maybe you don't want to scare them by saying you could end up cut up in pieces in somebody's soup bowl, because maybe that's too much for like a 6-year-old. I'm just saying. Right. So you turn them into a rabbit, and then it's, you know what I'm saying? Right. But that appealed to me constantly. So that was a lot of what I was attracted to. And if you go and read those things, they have a poetic rhythm.
They really do. Yeah,
they really do.
So let me ask you, just going on this, I'm a little, it's not more than a lot late to the game, but I'm actually become a fan of rap in a way that I was not as a kid. Not all rap, but some of it has real poetic resonance and power. NWA, Wu-Tang Clan, Eminem, and the like. I mean, are you a fan of that genre?
Let me tell you, as soon as you said that, first thing I thought of was Gil Scott-Heron. Listening to Gil Scott-Heron, because remember, been around 69 years on this planet. So listening to Gil Scott-Heron and the rhythm of his songs, the words that he said, I actually got to meet him saw him on a subway many years later, like probably not that long ago, you know, I mean, before he passed, but I remember him very clearly. And when rap started happening, to me, I was attracted to the beat and the message and the words, for sure.
Yeah, I'm watching now. I'm rewatching because you know, they're doing this series on Hulu about the formation of the Wu-Tang Clan.
Yeah,
and it was interesting. I remember in let's call it the 90s, I was actually tutoring a kid who was really into Wu-Tang Clan, and I remember this at the time being a little dismissive of it because I was, 20, whatever, and I just didn't know. And I knew he was into it and I didn't really care, but it was also something that I just didn't really know. You think, but you don't know, because I wasn't really listening. I wasn't. I was judging, and I should not have done that, but I did. But I'm listening, and I'm watching this series, and you hear there's so much brilliance, the power and the sophistication and the rhyming and the imagery. Some of it is absolutely incredible, and it hits me in such a way that there's a visceral reaction in me that I don't even get from, and I love music, all kinds of music, but sometimes the expression in rap is, it resonates in a way that almost nothing else does, at least for me.
Yeah, I think that at any point in life that we look at something that's coming from a different area, culture, someplace, whatever, it's always started with I think it's often started, I don't believe in always and never, right. It's often started as some kind of message or reaction to a social situation.
Right, yes.
People think of jazz. Oh, I was trying to think of Langston Hughes, I think it is, that I'm thinking of. People think of jazz as just music, but jazz was created because Black musicians were being taught, and I'm not making this is just some research I've read because I just love reading. If I could clone myself and that person only could read, I'd be happy. So jazz was started because Black musicians, from what I've read, were being told what they could and couldn't play. Right. And so jazz was created as a kind of like, just play what came from their heart. in the neighborhood. It wasn't something that was, and then it blew up. And Langston Hughes wrote jazz poetry.
Oh, sure did.
Friggin' amazing. And again, it's the rhythm, it's the sound of it, it's the words, and that's how poetry is to me. It is like music. This is how I write. When I write something, I'm just hearing it and I'm dictating it on paper, and ain't nobody else in the room. And I'm like, bet I'm putting my name on this.
That's right. I've got Langston Hughes collected work right over there on the shelf. Yes. Great stuff. So you're also a poet. You also do some sci-fi and fantasy poetry. And I can't say that, I mean, not that I've read much horror poetry, but I can't say I've read much sci-fi fantasy poetry. Talk to me about that a little bit.
I love it when people say that, because I actually was writing fiction in science fiction and fantasy before I did horror. For me, since horror is, as been said before, I think Amy mentioned it in chat, most people will agree that horror is an emotion that you feel, you invoke what you're writing, you feel it when you're watching or reading it. For me, I was not secure enough psychologically to handle what made me afraid until I got to like out of college.
Right.
So I started off writing fantasy and science fiction. Then once I sort of faced my fears and got comfortable with them, that's when I did that kind of writing. But I wanted forever to get in Isaac Asimov's science fiction magazine. Like that was my biggest goal before anyone even knew me, ever heard of me, nothing, because I'd read as much of Asimov as I could.
Right.
And I actually got to meet him and do signings and had some funny interactions with him, because pretty much I was the only Black person showing up at these things.
Right.
After one time, he like, oh, it's you again. I'm like, it is. So when they started the magazine, I think it was 75 when the magazine was 76, I started sending them everything I could. And it was stories, and they kept bouncing back, and then I'd send them somewhere else, and 80% would get published. I was at New York is book country, which if you ever been to it, it used to be the Fifth Avenue. They shut it down, and then authors would come and they talk about books. So I was there talking to, I believe it was Frederick Poole, and saying, I just always want to get Asimov Science Fiction Magazine. And he was like, well, every science fiction writer has to write a Why Did Dinosaurs Die story. And I was like, okay, see, that's me. I'm that person when you're like, just no one can, either you say no one can ever do this or you should do that. Either of those things I'm going to act on. So I run back, I write this little like 50-word Why Did Dinosaurs Die story. Gordon Lisner's from the writers group. I'm sure he got to read it then. And everyone in the group was like, Linda, it's 50 words. It's not a story.
Right.
I don't know if someone actually said maybe it's a poem or not. I went home, changed that thing in a poem. That was the first thing I got published in Asimov Science Fiction Magazine.
Right on. That's great. Let me ask you something. You touched on, you made a really interesting observation about yourself, about not having the emotional, maybe psychological maturity at a younger age to sort of, maybe completely grasp or embrace or be willing to face your fears, but that happened a little bit later. What was that like? I mean, if you don't mind sharing, what was that like for you?
Which, before or after?
Well, both.
Before, it was the reason that I didn't talk much. I thought if I could be invisible, I would get hit less and be safer. Not always worked out as a plan. And then once I got out of the house at 18, I was like, I am out and I am staying out. So I just stayed out in the world. I went to college. I got jobs in the summertime. I didn't ever go back to that dangerous situation until after. I mean, the first summer I went back, and then I was like, oh no, I've been out of danger in college for too long. I can't do this anymore. To get in touch with it, to write from it, because I do mentor writers. I say young writers, and I don't mean age, I mean how long they've been writing and published.
Right.
And I'm always pushing them to do what I push myself to do, which is how I made the crossover. And that is, how authentic can I write from myself inside? Doesn't mean you ever have to publish it. I tell them that all the time.
Right. That's true.
You don't have to show anybody. But if you can write from the authentic side of you inside that's reacting and feeling in the world, that's where you're going to find the voice that people are going to read and want to read again. And that's been how I'd like to think that's how I got to where I am. I mean, I think observing yourself and making those kinds of decisions is really hard. I think I will leave that to somebody who's studying my work and can talk about it.
Right.
But that's how it felt to me. You know, at some point I had enough distance in the world and control of my life to feel safe enough to say what really scares me and write about it.
Yeah, it's sort of, and I know that as I've evolved also, there's this, I think when we're younger, less confident, maybe even less mature, less experienced, there's a fear of exposing what you perceive to be the uglier sides of your thoughts, your feelings. And if I tell people I think this or feel this way, what are they going to think about me and what that's going to mean? So it's easier so you just don't. Right. But when you start to do it, it seems to add a depth to your works that can't be replicated sort of intellectually.
Absolutely. I believe in it 1,000%. And, anyone can pick up one of my books and be like, is this about your life? And I'm like, I'm a fiction writer. Everything I make and write is made up, she said, tongue in cheek.
Right. No, that's not me. That's based on somebody else I know.
Yeah, don't push me on it too hard, because literally I'm at the point now that I'm sorry, not sorry about things. So,
right. So let me ask you about
you don't want a question answered by me.
So first of all, you've said you're 69, which I believe you, but I would never believe you if you didn't tell me that was true. You don't even look even remotely close to that. Not even remotely close, but I'll leave that there. So talk to me about, I love so you've got the tats, you've got the big earrings. So what do you got going on there? Let me see what's there.
There's a mohawk. I'm wearing purple hair today. It could be blue or gold tomorrow. I use this hair wax so I can change the hair color. I have a dragon on my arm. There's a whole story behind that one, by the way.
Let's hear it.
Okay. Haven't been asked that much. So when I was in junior high and high school, I was picked on a lot because I was tall, skinny, lanky, and did not wear cool clothes and didn't talk much. So I was just like this awkward, uncool clothes wearing person and got picked on a lot. So I would remember walking home from school thinking they're just picking on me because I have these huge, beautiful wings and they don't have them and they're jealous. So somewhere in the 90s, and I was reading a lot of dragon fantasy. Ooh, woman writer who's done a lot. Someone help me. I'm so bad with this. But anyway, in the 90s, I decided I wanted a tattoo. So with a dragon.
That's a little bit of, I am woman, hear me roar.
Something like that. I am a dragon. Yes, Anne McCafferty. Thank you, Teal.
That's it.
I'm not even stuck on being male or female. Just call me a dragon.
I am me, hear me roar.
That's right.
That's it. All right. Okay. All right. All right. That was great. Now it's time for a special segment where we spin the wheel. On the wheel are seven possible categories, including some new ones I added just for tonight. Wherever it lands is what you get. And the categories are The Raven, Silence of the Lambs, Event Horizon, Dreamweaver, Stranger in a Strange Land, Trick or Treat, and our new favorite one, Kick 'em in the Junk. You ready? Here we go. All right, what do we got for you today? We got Kick 'em in the Junk. All right.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Is that junk like J-U-N-K?
Uh-huh. You can travel to any point in time and space, and without repercussion, you can kick someone in the junk. Who would it be?
Oh my gosh, so many things go through my mind. Honestly, not for nothing, I was thinking Hitler. Yeah, I'd like to kick him in the. Then I know Columbus had a good thought when he came here, but I think I would kick him in when he was offering them the Indians beads. No, you get a kick. Yeah.
All right, right on. I love it. Okay. All right. So you and I are both in the writing business. So we're going to go to our advice column. What's the best and worst writing advice someone ever gave you?
Ooh. The worst I The only thing that I can remember thinking as not cool, but taught me lessons, because I also am not a great regret person. I don't live with regret. I like to like, what can I learn from this? You know what I'm saying? So the thing I remember was being in high school, writing an interpretive paper on the red badge of courage. And I had been writing a lot by then. No one even saw it, but I was writing a lot. And this teacher telling me, you're going to get less than an A because it's not the traditional interpretation. And me thinking, you need a kick in the junk because I don't know what you're talking about. See, like,
you got to put him back on the list.
My new favorite thing, man. And I remember sitting there, totally introverted, totally like bullied by the world, and thinking, you're wrong. Who are you to tell me how I think? I'm not going to think traditional. What? So that was kind of the worst thing I can remember. It never stopped me, but I just remember having that reaction. The best. Oh, I have been blessed with a lot of really good feedback, a lot of good supportive things by people, so many wonderful people like Dallas, who is mayor, who is no longer with us, Jack Ketchum. Wow. I think that one of the things that just surfaces my mind right now is my grandmother reading one of my stories when I was in high school and saying, Linda, this is really good. I like this. And it was one of my fantasy stories. And somehow the fact that she could read one of my stories and I could tell from her heart, she really like enjoyed it. I wrote it, you read it, you enjoyed it. Whew, I just got a chill saying that.
Right on. Good on you. Sounds like that sounds like a good lady.
She was amazing.
Well, hold on. So let's stick on that for a quick second. So what was this, on your mom's side or your dad's?
My mom's side.
Yeah.
My dad's side of the family, I did go down south. They were from Winston-Salem and spend a couple summers on their farm. But they were more like cooking, doing stuff, grandparents, you know what I'm saying? The interaction wasn't with more. My mother's mother, my grandmother, was very attentive, you know, not just to me, but her attention to me and caring was really important. I mean, my mom did, but she was still like raising babies. So there wasn't a lot of time for that. When she was older, after the babies were out of the house and I was getting published, oh my God, best moment ever. Her being at the first Stoker I won.
Oh, that's great.
It was amazing.
Oh, what a moment that must have been.
I'm getting chills just thinking about it. It was so wonderful to give her the award that I had gotten.
Oh, that's great. Wow. Thank you so much for sharing that. That's a great story.
Yeah, she was at the table with the writers group. Gordon was there, Linsner and other people. And I was actually one of the presenters with Gerard Huanair, who's my second husband. I guess I should stop tagging people's husbands. They can just be people. So anyway, Gerard, a wonderful, incredible writer. He and I were presenting the awards, and so I had to get off the stage when the poetry came up, even though I was like, you know, I was up against people that I admired, Charlie Jacob and other people like that. I was like, I was so happy to be on the final ballot with them. And Trish took my place. And when there's pictures, I just saw them of when Gerard said my name. I got up, I said my thanks, and then I had to go back up on stage for the rest of the awards for the other categories. I gave the award to my mom. I made her stand up when I did the thanks. She did a whole Lady Di thing. I got pictures. I was like, Mom, you are something else. She was like in it to win it.
Oh, that's great. Excellent. All right. So as writers, so when we put our work and ourselves out there, criticism of all kinds inevitably comes with it, the good, the bad, and everything in between. So my question is, how do you feel about reviews and criticism? Do you take them to heart? Do you let them roll off you, or do some stick with you more than others?
I will tell you that my feelings is what I also transfer to people I mentor. And this year, in the last 12 months, 2 or 3 of them are just flying amazing. They're doing so well. But is this, everyone reads your work from every moment of their life and their emotion and their psychology. You don't know what that is. You're writing from that too. What are the odds that they're going to hook up and be the same? I wouldn't bet on that odd. So I cannot control any reaction when I put work out there. No one can. All you can do is put it out, love it yourself. I'm a great lover of my work, and I try to tell people you should love your work. You know, you don't get to work with me and say this is crap, because I ain't accepting that. That's not how we roll. So so I remember the good things people say, and anyone that has any other critique is their opinion, and they're allowed to it. Neither or none of that has anything to do with when I sit down and write. I go into a zone, I write what I hear, I come out of the zone.
All right, that was great. And I love what you were saying about how, you know, syncing up, the odds of syncing up from their place and your place, odds are not in your favor. All right, so we got a couple of minutes. Let's see if we got any other questions from here, although I'm not seeing any questions right now, but I did want to ask a little bit more. So we were talking about just where you've kind of lived throughout your life. You started out in Philly, you ended up in New York for quite a while, and now you are in Tucson, Arizona, which couldn't be any more different than either of those places. So what brought you out there, and what's it like for you in such a completely different environment?
Let me tell you, when I moved here, I was like, wow, I changed everything except like my sex, it seems like, because everything's so friggin' different here. You know, nothing bad against changing sex, because I've always, you know, thought that would be cool if I could just do it with a snap of a finger, but that's not how that works either. But I have been visiting my cousins here, Iris, who I love and adore, and is like my spokesman. Everywhere she goes, she sells my books. She's so adorable. So I have been visiting her and her mom, my Aunt Henrietta, who is my mother's oldest sister. And my mother was a Bible-toting woman, Aunt Henrietta had no problem being sorry, not sorry. So like I gravitated to her in so many ways, even though I love my mom too. So I came out to visit my Aunt Henrietta when she moved out here from Philly, and just fell in love with the mountains, man, and the air. And then I started looking at the cost of living, because did I mention I have a BS in math? So everything is in a spreadsheet in my life, right? So I started looking at the spreadsheet of everything I was paying for in New York, and then what it would cost here, and everything's like an easy 30% less. And I was like, so you telling me if I sell my house in the Bronx and move here, I could retire earlier than 70? I'm in. So it was like winning the lottery. I mean, I didn't see it coming.
Yeah.
This time I saw the Catalinas, I got like zillions of ideas of levels of writing on a piece I was working on. I was like, this can't be right, because I'm an inner city kid. This ain't right at all. But you know what? So right it was. So wrong it was right.
Right on. Right on. So we got a couple of questions that popped in. One I'm going to save for our next bit. So the question is, do you write from the sound or the feel of the words?
Both. There's no difference in so many ways. I don't even know how to answer that. And I've never even thought about it before, but I can easily answer it that way. Really, when I sit down and I go into the zone, which is the easiest way I can explain what happens to me when I'm writing, because it's very organic, it's very it's very subconscious and non-conscious. I almost hear the words and I feel them, and then they go on the computer paper. I have journals. This is my latest one, The Art of Writing. I mean, I have a picture on Facebook that I put up of like 170 something that I've had since 1971. I write it all down, and then I go back and read it. And so when I'm reading and editing, then I read it out loud, because that's how I can hear and feel how the words are. So there's it's not really separate from me.
Yeah. So this flows into the next question. So do you write first drafts longhand, or do you go straight to the keyboard?
I do keyboard mostly for fiction and nonfiction, but for poetry, it can start in the book. You know, of all the books, now I've got a new pattern where I go to the back and I start writing something. Like, here's something I wrote after I misheard someone say a commercial. They were saying after something about affordable life insurance. And I heard some of my best writing has come from this hearing, afterlife insurance.
I love it.
Afterlife insurance for secure transitions to the level of high-low you want. And then another one, we fleas on the back of inspiration, giants who don't feel us feeding on the dust of their dreams. I mean, that just came out of me and I wrote it in the book. And later I'll go back and pull that and turn it into more of a poem, most likely. But
right on.
But, yeah.
All right. Well, that was great. And so we've got a little more stuff. So we've talked about writing. So now let's share with some folks some stuff that you've actually got to share. So I'm going to share my screen. So bear with me for just a minute while I pull up some stuff here. And then let me just make sure I'm doing this right. It doesn't always go. All right. So we seeing this here?
Woo-hoo.
All right.
Yeah.
So talk to me about Black Panther.
Oh my gosh. What can't I say about Black Panther? Dude, I'm going to take that big old book and put it on a chain and wear it around my neck. It was an amazing opportunity. My story is called Shadow Dreams. It's the first book put out by Marvel of stories by Black writers in the realm of Black Panther. And I don't even know what more to say. It's amazing. There are no pictures. I do have to tell people this. It's not a comic book.
Right.
You get to make the pictures up in your head. It's just so much. I could talk all day and night about it.
What's the theme of your story?
Okay, I was going to say blessings to Jesse Holland for being the editor of this. My story, I start a lot of things I write with like, what if this happens? So my story, I wanted to answer the question, what it would be like to show up in the golden city of Wakanda as a 14-year-old girl training to be a Dora Milaje, which is the warrior women.
Wow.
So that was how the story started, this girl showing up. She has her own issues. She wants to be the best. Things don't always go so easily. And then I've been obsessed with quantum physics forever. And I'm really into infinite realities and multiple realities. So there's some of that in there.
Oh, very, very cool. Well, I got to get me a copy of this one. All right.
I'm ashamed, as I tell people, I'm ashamed, Russ, that you're even saying that. You know, while I'm talking, you could order it on Amazon, boo, or somewhere. Look for it in your neighborhood.
Well, now I know. I know what my next purchase is.
You best.
I will. All right. So we got some more stuff to share. Bear with me just a minute here. Let's see. All right. Okay. So what do we got? So what do we got here?
Oh my gosh. The bucket list item that I had given up on 40 years ago. So I have 2 poems in the magazine of fantasy and science fiction, the latest one out September, October. And my name is on the cover. Get out of here. What? So the 2 poems, and I was sending them everything I could think of, like Asimov, but I never broke through. So until now, this is the second one this year I've been in. The first one was April, March, I think, where I had a poem dedicated to Octavia Butler, who's one of my biggest breathtaking persons. And I have 2 poems in this September, October issue, and they're both what I call and response poems, taken off of Edgar Allan Poe poems. Wow. So I don't know if there's a real name for it. I'm still looking. If anyone knows out there, let me know. But I've been calling them call and response, meaning that I read a poem, and one is the sonnet to science. Mine is called Sonnet to Meta Science. And what I did is I read Poe's poem, put it in my subconscious, forgot about it, and then all of a sudden it came back out with my message, my words, but his rhythm.
Wow, that is great. That is great. Well, Linda, I got to tell you, you're a fascinating person and a wonderful writer, and I can't wait to start digging into some stuff. So folks, as for me, if you're up for a little Blade Runner style sci-fi with your crime and mystery and maybe just a touch of horror, I'll encourage you to check out my sci-fi noir Fractured Lives, featuring my hard-boiled intergalactic private eye, Angela Hardwick, part Doctor Who, part Blade Runner, and part Philip Marlowe. In Fractured Lives, Hardwick is hired to find out if a college freshman who is also a galaxy design savant, is suffering from a nervous breakdown or is the victim of an urban legend known as the Scarlet Raj. Fractured Lives is available on Amazon and published by Crazy 8 Press. And if you want a signed copy, you can order it directly from me. All right. So, Linda, I want to
admit that I got to buy that now because you said all the words I like in one book.
All right. Right on. All right. So that's our show. Linda, thank you so much for a great hour. And I want to thank everyone who's watching at home. I'm your host, Russ Colchamiro, and I'll see you all next week. Take care now.
It's been great.
All right. Thank you so much, Linda. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.